This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Immigrant Beat. That's how the New York-based band MAKU Soundsystem describes its riveting sound, which mixes traditional Afro-Colombian rhythms with Afro-funk, punk, psychedelia, and other sounds from around the world. While most of the band's members are originally from Colombia, MAKU formed nearly a decade ago right here in New York. MAKU Soundsystem has just released a new EP titled Cinco Fuegos, which means 5 fires. It features the song Por Encima.
A mí nadie me mete zancadilla. A mí nadie me mete zancadilla. Yo paso por encima, yo paso por encima, yo paso por encima, yo paso. Yo paso por encima, yo paso por encima, yo paso por encima, yo paso. Hey.
That was Por Encima by MAKU Soundsystem. Well, they're joining us here in our studio, the band's vocalist, Liliana Condesiera, and bassist, Juan Espina. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Juan, talk about MAKU Soundsystem, when you founded it here in the city.
So MAKU starts in around 2009. It's the brainchild of guitar player Camilo Rodriguez from MAKU. Since then, the band has taken a change, right? We started about now 6 albums ago, and in that you can see the growth of the band throughout those years.
And you call it Immigrant Beat.
We call it Immigrant Beat. That's what we call it. We're from Colombia. We live in New York. We're in an experience that in this Western reality of ours fits in the immigrant sound, right? We're people who are trying to trot the world, who are trotting the world musically and culturally. So that's our beat.
Liliana Condesiera, talk about where you came from, how you came to help form this band.
Sure. So I came from Barranquilla, Colombia, and I migrated here in 2001.
When in 2001? A significant year.
Yes, definitely. Mid-June of 2001.
In New York?
New York City.
3 months later, September 11th happened.
Yeah. I had obviously no idea what was going on. Had just landed, didn't speak a word of English also, or barely. And so it was quite a shocking experience in many levels, as you know, you can imagine. And coming from, I was at the time, I turned 12 about a month and a half after arriving. So it's like a pretty pivotal time of just growing up and coming of age. So I feel like I was coming of age partially in Colombia and then landed here. And then just like, my mind was like, you know, blown open by like so much culture and diversity and also so much complexity in the world and like in New York City.
And then you together with others form MAKU Soundsystem. MAKU means?
So MAKU, it was inspired, the name of the band was inspired from an indigenous community who lived in the Amazon, and they didn't have any contact with the rest of the Colombian society or actual Colombian society. They wouldn't have identified as Colombians, right? Until many years of violence in Colombia reached their community where they lived, and they were forced to migrate and like live in cities and wear different clothes and speak a different language than their own. So Camilo actually felt, related to that in a way by us like being here, learning a different language than our own, and like saw a lot of similarities and took up that name, part of the name.
MAKU, Juan, is initials, M period, A period, K period, U period. Are they really initials?
Well, no, actually they weren't. It's how we have been growing as we have been playing, and it's at the moment where the name was chosen, that's how it was. Nowadays we actually write it straight, M.A.K.u, straight, MAKU. Being sort of the association with the everyday people, with the people that come in contact with other cultures, and then you're either in a dynamic to assimilate or continue to keep your own. And that's what we're sort of the ordinary people, the everyday people. And the sound system brings the celebration, the parties. It's a party for the everyday people.
So I want to go back to Por Encima, the song we started in the clip that you made a music video for, too.
Yeah.
Talk about what it means,
Definitely.
Liliana.
Sure. So Por Encima, to me, the way that song came about, we were just jamming. A lot of this new album, it's just a lot of the songs for this new album were born in that way, just organically playing. Somebody starts, and then somebody jumps on, and somebody jumps on, and I jumped on singing and like improvising. And what I was thinking at the time, and what I oftentimes am thinking, I think I sing about what I'm going through, right? And so I was singing to myself, kind of telling myself to not be afraid and to open my wings and not be afraid to take flight. And that's what the song is about. And
it means going above.
It means going above mountains, above obstacles, or what may seem like obstacles that are also there to like help us grow and help us overcome and get to our peak, right? Our peak self.
You play it in Spanish, but can you explain in English what the words are as we introduce it?
Sure, definitely. So the first verse talks about no one can trip me. No one can trip me because I go above that. I just fly above that. And then the rest of it continues. Above the mountain, you fly above the mountain. Don't be afraid. And then spread your wings, I'll light a candle for you. That's the chorus. And if we showed, I think we showed a clip of the music video. I also just want to mention that the music video was a big collaboration with a crew of young queer filmmakers from Colombia who live in Colombia, in Santa Marta, and who I was extremely excited to work with because as a queer person in the US, I just couldn't even imagine what it would be like to be queer in Colombia. And so running into them and meeting them and bonding with them over this song and this music video was a really beautiful experience.
So it is a song to challenge transphobia, homophobia.
Yes. So very explicitly in the music video and more openly and metaphorically through the lyrics, because the lyrics themselves don't talk about sexuality or sexual orientation, but the music video does. So, yeah.
Let's go to Por Encima. We'll go back to it.
Por
Por Encima, that's Going Above. It's one of the songs on this latest album of MAKU Soundsystem. The new album is Cinco Fuegos, 5 Fires. And we're joined by 2 of the founders of the band, vocalist Liliana Conde Sierra and bassist Juan Espina. Now, Juan, you come from Colombia, you live here. Talk about how you journeyed through New York because of, well, the way your family migrated, which is an example of so many Latin American immigrants.
So, to say this in a short way, I've always loved the idea of just being a musician and playing, like, since I was a little kid. So I heard this story of Jimi Hendrix, how he called his dad from England at age 16 and says, "Daddy, I want to be famous." I'm like, "I want to be that." It wasn't quite like that, you know. There was dishes to wash, peppers and onions to chop, and work and do all kinds of stuff. Learn the language, try not to assimilate, but to embrace. Try to share, as we learn.
Here in New York City.
Well, it starts in Rochester, New York. For me, it starts in Rochester, New York. I lived 5 years there. I come from Bogota, Colombia. And my aunt lives there. She migrated to Rochester from New York City as she would, after working for 15 years, cleaning houses, So
a group of women
moved from friends of her to Rochester. And
Puerto Rican women.
Puerto Rican,
Colombian.
Dominican, and my aunt being Colombian, seeking sort of a different reality than New York because it became too stressful, too much working, and there's no, So I go there. I go to Rochester. I don't speak a drop of English then. I hear your show on the 3rd day because I started working at this restaurant called Savory Time.
You heard Democracy Now!
I heard Democracy Now!, but I
Rochester.
didn't understand anything. So there was a person whose name is Peg. She's like a second mother for me. And at that time we were meeting, and she's listening to that radio every day into your show. And then as we got to speak more and more and learn the language and all that stuff, she starts telling me, well, this is good news. This is real news. You gotta hear it. So for me, the presence of Democracy Now!, it's been since day 3rd. So that's it. So music became farther and farther, to be honest. As my reality here started to sink in, working, it came to a point that I wasn't playing any music anymore. 5 years later, I had met the person, my love, my partner. We moved here to her hometown, New York. And fortunately, I started to meet with this family little by little. I started to see in the parks Colombian music being played on the drums and re-recognizing that. And then that re-recognition, I started to remember why I came here. And so we decided that I personally, once MAKU comes into my life in 2009, really early 2010 for me, I jump in because I felt like I left my entire country, mom and everybody there, to go run an errand that I never completed.
So, Liliana, talk about Llama, the next song that we're going to play that you performed here at Democracy Now!
Sure. Llama is a really powerful song to me. The title Llama means flame, or it can also mean calling. And I think the whole song is talking about that. It's talking about the fire that we have within that's calling us to do what we're called to do what we came here to do, whatever that may be. And I think that that's always at its root aligned with what the earth needs, which is also what the song talks about. There's a verse in the song that goes, cuando la tierra te llama, tú siempre contestas. That means when the earth is calling you, you always answer. And when life is calling you, you always answer. So that, to me, I think is a really important message to share because we often forget, I have been there, like coming here, and like I can relate to what Juan was saying, right? Coming here and just feeling like I'm not from here, I'm not from there. Like, let me just make sure I don't forget where I come from and what I'm here to do, which is in this moment right now to share this message.
Let's go to Llama.
El día que amanece lento, recoge solo tus ideas, levanta, apaga tu mirada para todo lo que venga. Me está llamando. El día que amanece lento, recoge solo tus ideas, levanta, apaga tu mirada para todo lo que venga. Me está llamando. Semilla que va germinando llamando, paciencia que el enfoque llega, el tiempo que flota en el aire, las horas al viento se entregan, semilla que va germinando, paciencia que el enfoque llega, el tiempo que flota en el aire y el viento se entrega.
Me está llamando.
De a poco te zafas del miedo, un dedo tras otro lo sueltan, en tu pecho una llamarada que por dentro quema.
Me está llamando.
De a poco te zafas del miedo, un dedo tras otro lo sueltan, en tu pecho una llamarada que todo lo quema.
Me está llamando.
Y me está llamando. Óyelo.
Me está llamando.
Un fuego que todo lo quema, un fuego que todo lo quema. Responde que te está llamando, responde que te está llamando. Un fuego que por donde quema, un fuego que todo lo quema, un fuego que todo lo quema, un fuego que todo lo quema. Y dice que te está llamando, dice que quiere llegar y que le dedique tu canto a él.
Me está llamando.
Y dice que te está llamando, dice que quiere llegar y que le dedique tu canto a él.
Me está llamando.
No quieres en tu camino, tiene bien clara la ruta. Cuando la vida te llama ya nada te asusta.
Me está llamando.
No quieres en tu camino, tiene bien clara la ruta. Cuando la vida te llama ya nada te asusta.
Me está llamando.
Y sigue tu luz para adelante, con tu verdad abre puerta. Cuando la tierra te llama tú siempre contesta.
Me está llamando.
Sigue tu luz para adelante, con tu verdad abre puerta. Cuando la tierra te llama tú siempre contesta.
Y me está llamando. Y me está llamando.
Óyelo. Y un fuego por dentro que quema, y un fuego por dentro que quema. Responde que te está llamando, responde que te está
Me está
llamando.
llamando.
Un fuego por dentro que quema, y un fuego por dentro que quema. Un fuego por dentro que quema, y un fuego por dentro que quema. Te está llamando, 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 te está llamando,
Botón de fuego.
te está llamando,
La tierra nos llama.
te está llamando,
Música en el cielo.
te está llamando,
Fuego, semilla y alma.
te está
Y te está llamando.
te está llamando,
Te está llamando.
te está llamando,
Te está llamando.
te está
That's MAKU Soundsystem, and we're joined by two of the founders. Liliana Conde Sierra is the band's vocalist, and the bassist and singer is Juan Espina. Would you want to say more about Llama?
I mean, besides what you said, I think he's right. It's a calling. It's a calling to keep on pursuing amidst the hardest or the hardship of the times, the hardship of our times, of each individual time. Yeah, there are very good lines talking about, like, you know, we have the Alegre drum on that song. You know, that's a diaspora drum from Africa and Colombia, you know, and it means the happy drum. So we call on to the happy drum and really the happy drummer, to really give us his role, to cure us with that African power, for we feel that a lot of the music is an act of, I don't know if it's revelry, but it's an act of joy, it's an act of surviving, it's an act of survival, of perseverance to give culture. So that's what it is. It's a light, it's a candle, calling us.
I wanted to go on to m.a.k.u, but it seems through Cinco Fuegos, 5 Flames, the name of your album, is this idea of the earth and the constant presence. And talk about m.a.k.u. Liliana.
Sure. So m.a.k.u is an interesting connection for me because so m.a.k.u is a Orisha from the Yoruba tradition, and she embodies in this earth. She's represented by water. Right? Represents water, and whether it's the ocean, the rivers, our blood, right? The rivers in our veins. I think I personally, the song came about just kind of organically. Like I came in and then like you guys were already singing about m.a.k.u, and I was like, oh, okay, I can get into this, right? Where I come from, Barranquilla is a coastal city. That's a port city right by the ocean, and it's where the Magdalena River meets the ocean. So there's this place called Bocas de Ceniza, which means mouth of ashes or mouths of ashes, right. Which is where the river meets the sea, the Caribbean Sea, and the Caribbean Ocean, in Barranquilla. And I remember my grandmother always saying, like, those are the places where rivers meet oceans with like the most undercurrents, the most like action is happening. And so at the same time, like there's so much action and so much energy in that space, and at the same time that's coming from water. So m.a.k.u in this album Cinco Fuegos is like balance for me. There's like so much action going on.
And talk about the music, Juan, this combination that you have of, all the different various forms of music.
So, I mean, the music has been, it's the most sincere answer I can give you is that it's the communication between us as members who have been rehearsing every week for the past 9 years. So, but there are things that influence us and things that we like. So, maybe not so much in this album, but in the ones prior, you will hear a lot of the Colombian rhythms from specific regions of Colombia being played on the alegre drum and being, we follow a lot of those traditional rhythms. But then, since the band is eclectic to say somehow, right, and it's not really, we're not projecting ourselves as a band that has individual, original material, right? So, in that sense, the rhythms are a lot of inspiration on what we hear. So in this band, if you ask from anybody, we hear music from Haiti, from different places in Africa, from
Nigeria,
right. So there is also our music as Colombians who have heard, from the interior, from the coast, Palenque, but then also even ballads that make a difference in our early days that our parents would listen to. Just I guess there's so many sort of influences that go into it, but the music that gets to be put out is, at the end of the day, is eclectic. It's just, Cape Verde's in there.
It's MAKU.
It's MAKU.
This is
Immigrant.
m.a.k.u.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando? ¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Ay, ¿qué será lo que está pasando?
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
¿Y qué será lo que está pasando?
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Voy entrando aquí a mi pueblo
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
y me reciben llorando.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Yo no sé lo que tú tienes
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
y me sigo preguntando.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Detrás de la cola del pato,
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
mi árbol me lo están tumbando.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Detrás de la cola del pato,
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
ay, mi árbol me lo están tumbando.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
lo que está pasando?
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Di, ¿qué será lo que está pasando?
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Por la calle hay un silencio
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
y se mete en tu ventana.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Ay, yo no sé lo que tú
¿Qué será lo
tienes.
que está pasando?
Siempre voy cuando me llaman.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
En la calle hay un tumulto
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
y todos van caminando.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Ay, que tiene mi pueblo, oye.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Que todos van caminando.
¿Qué será lo que está pasando?
Ayúdame a desmayar, que no sé qué va a pasar. Ayúdame a desmayar, que no sé qué está pasando. Oye, ayúdame a desmayar. Ay, báñame en agua salada. Ayúdame a desmayar, que no sé qué está pasando. Y ayúdame a desmayar, 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 ayúdame a desmayar.
m.a.k.u, the Yoruba goddess. That's the latest album of MAKU Soundsystem, one of the songs, and our guests are two of the founders of MAKU, Liliana Conde Sierra, the band's vocalist, and bassist Juan Espina. Let's talk a little about the album. You have this beautiful album cover, and maybe you can talk about it. Cinco Fuegos, 5 flames. Liliana.
Sure. So the concept for this album came about through a lot of conversations, and also through like noticing what we were talking about in the songs as the songs were kind of born around the same time, and thinking about. I personally have just been trying to tap into what lessons I can learn from the earth, right? When these songs were being written, I was teaching an after-school program, and I was teaching in Jackson Heights at my old middle school. So that was a beautiful cycle, closing a
Jackson
cycle.
Heights, for people who don't know, is in Queens, New York, one of the 5 boroughs, and it's the most diverse borough in the world.
That's right. That's where I was lucky to grow up, or once I came here, and so I went back to my old middle school, and I was teaching an after-school percussion class, and there was some space, and I started teaching an after-school gardening class as well. So I was learning a lot about seeds, and I learned about these seeds that are resistant, not only resistant, but also reliant on fire to germinate. And so we started talking about this, and it was a beautiful metaphor to kind of hang on to, because these are times of fire, like we've been talking about, right? Times that are difficult for us as immigrants, or just for humanity, for people, for the humankind, and for Mother Earth, right? And so we wanted to kind of latch onto this hope of the seed that survives the flame, and not only survives it, but uses that flame to flourish at the end, right? To regenerate green and hope and colors and beauty and whatever may be under threat.
So a fire in these very difficult times, Juan.
Fire in these very difficult times will only make us re-green, out of the strength that comes from our identities, from our diversity, from our beat, from our rhythms, some sense out of that in these times of fire, so that the fields can be re-green.
Which takes us to your next song. In English, if you're coming for me, if you're coming at me. But Liliana, talk about it in Spanish.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and so you wanted to talk about it in Spanish?
The title.
So yeah, the title, Si Me Va a Tirar, that's a brand new song. That's actually not even in this album. So sneak preview. But so Si Me Va a Tirar, if you're coming for me, the song talks about you better not miss. If you're coming for me, you better not miss, because I'll be stronger afterwards, and I'll know where you came from. Like, I'll know something about you. And the verse of that song, what I was thinking with the verse was what makes me bigger and beyond whatever conflict I may be having, interpersonal conflict, or like something that's like just momentary, superficial, you know? So the verse of the song says, the winds tell my story. I've been here, or I live in the beginning and the end. And the mountain sees me and she smiles. And that's because I'm tapping into that, right? The power that is in being a universal being. So like beyond what you may be trying to threaten right now, I'm bigger than that. I go, right? I'm connected to something bigger.
Si me va a tirar, mejor tenga cuidado pa' que no falle. Ay, si me va a tirar, mejor tenga cuidado pa' que no falle. Los vientos cuentan mis historias, vivo al principio y al final. Los ríos corren por mis venas, definiendo mi libertad. La montaña me ve y sonríe, que junto a ella no hay rival. Yo no como cuento cualquiera, por dentro llevo mi verdad. Huelelele. Si me va a tirar, mejor tenga cuidado pa' que no falle. Y que si me va a tirar, mejor que no te vea por ahí en la calle. Ahí en la calle. Hey, que yo tengo raíz en los pies, 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 tengo raíz en los pies. Tengo raíz en los pies, 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 tengo raíz en los pies. Si me va a tirar, mejor tenga cuidado pa' que no falle. Y si me va a tirar, mejor tenga cuidado pa' que no falle. Los vientos cuentan mis historias, vivo al principio y al final. Los ríos corren por mis venas, definiendo mi libertad. La montaña me ve y sonríe, que junto a ella no hay rival. Yo no como cuento cualquiera, por dentro llevo mi verdad. Huelelele. Que si me va a tirar, mejor tenga cuidado pa' que no falle. Y si me va a tirar, mejor que no te vea por ahí en la calle, pa' que no falle. Y tengo raíz en los pies, 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 tengo raíz en los pies. Y a mí no me tumba nada, a mí no me tumba nada, a mí no me tumba nada, a mí no me tumba nada. Que tengo raíz en los pies, 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 tengo raíz en los pies.
Si me va a tirar, if you're coming for me. And that's MAKU Soundsystem, and they're in our studio today as we continue this interview and move to the last song, which is Nunca Fácil, and we're going to talk about just what that means with Liliana Conde Sierra and Juan Espina. Juan, talk about this song. It's not on the album?
That one is not either. So we keep on making music. We keep on, puts smiles in our face. It gives sense to our lives, so we keep on making music so long we can. And it means never easy. But he also talks about, while it's never easy, it's also not impossible. Because, I mean, that's, what else if it's not that, you know? So this song, basically the lyrics, what they talk about, I put some of those lyrics down, and it was just, again, just times of hardship, seeing, you know, when you start becoming sensible to things that are happening all around you, you know, it's so easy to be desensitized from what's happening around us, you know. But then you start focusing and you're like, oh man, you know, you see your closest sister in struggle, your closest brother in struggle, you see yourself in some struggle, and you say, well, you prepare yourself for it. You give yourself a mantra where you say, well, it's not going to be easy, but it's not going to be impossible. If you let your heart guide you, if you retake your time, a little bit of your time, these times when they're just trying to make you work and work and work, you may own a little bit of your happiness again. And this is all as mantras as we strive to do the same, right? So in a nutshell is that. It's never easy, but it's also not impossible. You know?
We've talked generally, but right now in this time, in this era of President Trump, I mean, the issue of immigrants being separated from their families. We're speaking in a week that a judge, interestingly enough, who's a Japanese-American federal judge, knows well what it meant for 110,000 people of Japanese descent to be interned during World War II in this country, has ruled that all kids must be reunited with their family. As we speak, the date is actually tomorrow. Yeah. And yet thousands of kids, we believe, have not been reunited, and hundreds of parents have already been deported. Your thoughts as you travel the country, as you sing for different audiences, Liliana, about the immigrant experience. I mean, you don't even call yourselves just Colombian or Colombian American. You talk about your Colombian immigrants.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, times of fire, right? So it's never been easy to leave your home, to leave your comfort zone. Whenever there's a crisis or an immigrant crisis or a migration crisis, we need to be asking what's happening in those places, right? And I think that's a narrative that I appreciate being present in Democracy Now! So much, and that is completely absent from any other type of mainstream media and attention. To me, this, you know, the actions of this government against families as they arrive here are completely horrendous. They're hypocritical when we think about why these families are coming here and the roots of the violence in the countries in Central America and South America. I mean, coming from Colombia. Also, I mean, everything that goes unseen and that is not in the public eye is you know, something that we need to be asking questions about, right? So going around the country and throughout the time of MAKU, getting to travel and getting to meet communities and play for communities and share our music for communities, you know, we hope to, I always hope to bring some energy and some light and some hope to these communities, you know.
I saw you performing, it was May Day.
Yeah.
It was in Bushwick. What's it like?
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was watching you, Juan. I was that one who was watching you. Maybe moving my feet and hands a little bit. But what's it like to perform?
Oh, it's great. It's great. To me, be able to perform, to me, to be able to play music is what it really does give me some peace. Like, I feel like I would not be able to make a sense of my life just alone if I wasn't being able to let some of it out through music and for a minute just kind of be able to take this in life. As an immigrant and families being ripped apart. Black people being shot by official bullets because they're black. You know, people being exploited under the excuse of a good economy. You know, people being miseducated under the promise of progress. People go to a hospital in this nation, and many nations that follow this nation, and if they're not with anybody that care for them, or if they have no insurance, you can end up dead in the place that they're supposed to heal you. That's the reality of our country. And so, it's horrendous. It makes you, as an immigrant, immediately start to think about, what am I doing here? And can they do it without us? I don't think so.
And it was when I saw you in Bushwick, it was the May Day festival, the Festival of Resistance. May Day, of course, such a significant time for immigrants in the last years when immigrants traditionally rise up, walk in the streets, demonstrate around the policies of this country that went back even before President Trump.
Right. So then, when you say even back, then you were talking about the foundation. The foundation of our nation has to be dealt with so we can have some balance. And this is for all nations. This nation, like many of our nations, where the seed was slavery, was exploitation, was annihilation of entire communities for economical purpose. When there was a time for many nations to make amends, so communities that were isolated, reprimanded, killed, exploit, whatever, could have a chance, a real platform to grow, Jim Crow came. Whenever there is any type of flavor, Jim Crow comes, right? Saying we don't want that. But we still talk about freedom. We still talk about equality when we actually do not act it. So we need to come and break that taboo. There are Latino communities, there are immigrant communities, there are black communities, there are Anglo-Saxon communities who don't get along still and who need to get along under a fair system, but that's where it's at.
Before we go to Nunca Fácil, never easy, you're a dad, you're a father,
I'm a father.
Your son Petro was dancing during your performances here.
Yeah.
What has it meant to have a child in this country?
Oh my God!
How old is Petro?
He's 5. He's 5, and I cannot imagine what any parent is going through right now, because I cannot imagine it.
You don't think he could go to court and defend himself?
No, I don't think it. It's so awful. But then we walk and we talk about freedom. Freedom. And I'm not talking about the people who have fought in here, us, grassroots for freedom, some kind of freedom to manifest. Just that, you know? Talk about people who really use the word in such an atrocious way. I mean, we have real misleading people leading the world. And speaking as they are the ones that know, the experts, failing at everything. So as a kid, my kid has the given divine right to be in this land. Wherever it is in his roundness, for this land is a being, a mother, you know? Talk about the world. And if the small myopic minds of a few impotent men are gonna start to detain, to slow that, there will be music on my end, there will be culture, there will be a fight on my end. For love, for the love, there will be love. No war, none of that they speak about. It's madness, it's evilness, it's foolishness what they speak about. It makes me want to do this. They don't make no sense to us. But I'm not surprised, because our foundation is to be dealt with.
Which brings us to our final song, Nunca Fácil, Never Easy.
Nadie dijo que esto iba a ser fácil, no, pero tampoco que no se podría. Si aquí no hay ningún experto, ni gato que sepa la salida. Nadie dijo que esto iba a ser fácil, no, pero tampoco que no se podría. Si aquí no hay ningún experto, ni gato que sepa la salida. Así que no desmayes, no. Yo también te toco, que aunque el tiempo pasó y un pasado de no, si la vida del papito no para nunca girando, lo predica la semilla cuando a fruto de llegar. Va a ser fácil, no, pero tampoco que no se podía. aquí no hay ningún experto, ni hay gato que sepa la salida. Nadie dijo que te iba a ser fácil, no, pero tampoco que no se podía. De aquí no hay ningún experto, ni hay gato que sepa la salida.
Así que no desmayes, no. Que otra vez te tocó, que aunque el tiempo pasó y un pájaro dejó, si la vida despacito no para nunca girar, oye. Lo pregona la semilla cuando a fruto de llegar. Quien va a navegar sus mares, digo, aprenderá a nadar. Y quien anda por las nubes como pájaro a volar. ¡Se va! ¡Uba! ¡Uba! ¡Ey!
MAKU Soundsystem, nunca fácil, never easy. And that does it for this segment of Democracy Now! Liliana Conde Sierra, the band's vocalist, and bassist Juan Ospina. This is Democracy Now! Their new album, just out, is called Cinco Fuegos, 5 Fires. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.